To paraphrase the popular Buddhist philosopher Alan Watts, money does not exist. Just as you would never have a carpenter walking off a job saying that he had run out of inches. It's always absurd to say that there is not enough money to do something. Inches are not made of wood, they're just a tool of measuring. Money has no inherent value, it's just a way of measuring resources. I could give you $100 worth of beef and you would have something. But if I gave you a $100 bill, you only have something if everyone around you agrees that that piece of paper has the value of $100. We come up with very convoluted rules about who owns or who controls the natural resources of a country. In America, you can own land, but you can't own a river. You can't own a coast. We own the land where our church is, but if we decided to raise money by starting an oil changing business in the front yard and we were just going to pour the used oil out on the ground, we would discover that that's not legal. It's our land, but when we wanted to add some classrooms out front, the County Planning and Zoning Commission told us that we would not be doing that. It's our land, but we are part of a community that has rules to protect the groundwater supply, the surrounding environment. So we sort of own it, but it is also owned by the culture, the civilization, the community. In our capitalist society, currency, land ownership, taxes, and social services form a very complex web of rules that work only to the degree that we all agree to buy into those rules. If we don't agree on the rules, then the notion that you hold the title to your house means that no one else can move into your house without you inviting them to, but that's based on a title that doesn't really exist. Without your agreeing to it, currency is just paper. It gains value when it's accepted in the marketplace as legal tender. But in reality, folks, money doesn't exist, land titles don't exist, governments don't exist. These are all societal constructs that exist only when people agree to pretend that they exist and follow the rules around their existence. We grow up around currency, we grow up around land ownership and a certain kind of government, and you start to believe that they are real. So you get conversations like this. The former Sex and the City star, Cynthia Nixon, has challenged the incumbent, Andrew Cuomo, for the Democratic nomination for this fall's governor's race in New York. Now, she lost that bid from the Democratic Party by a landslide. She didn't even come close. She's still promising that she's going to mount a grassroots effort to get herself on the ballot. But Nixon has campaigned wanting to make major investments in New York's education system and in their mass transit system, and she insists that under Cuomo that these two things have been woefully neglected. Now, during a very brief appearance on Morning Joe, Mika Brzezinski asked the question that is always asked of social progressives. How are you going to pay for these things that you've proposed?
But what, is he right about the funding? I mean, how would you fund the programs you are proposing? Where's the money going to come from? How does it work?
It's not on the face of it an unfair question. What I find to be hypocritical about this is that no one ever asked Cuomo when he was lowering corporate taxes about how he was going to pay for it. He eliminated manufacturing taxes. No one asked him how he was going to pay for it. And then he moved the bar in estate taxes. When Cuomo came into office, estates of more than $1 million were taxed, and then he raised it to $5 million. That's 5 times as much, right? And when Nixon complained that it was a tax giveaway to the super wealthy, even PolitiFact said it wasn't true because a $5 million estate was not super wealthy. We can't always trust the media to shoot straight with us on this. I'm saying going from 1 million to 5 million of protected estates, which cost the state of New York a great deal, and yet no one asked Governor Cuomo how he was going to pay for that. But when someone suggests that you begin to fix the crumbling subway system in New York, the way that the working class get to work or students get to school, then suddenly multimillionaire talk show hosts start to say, how on earth are you going to pay for that? Now, earlier this week, Andrew Gilliam shocked political pundits by winning the Democratic nomination for governor of Florida. He was immediately portrayed as being too liberal to be elected in Florida because he was pledging to address the school-to-prison pipeline in Florida. They have for-profit prisons in Florida that are full. They're constantly expanding. It's a huge profit center. So he wanted to increase funding for schools, and teacher pay in the state of Florida is 45th out of 50. So he's saying, if we know we've got this prison to, or school to prison pipeline, let's put more money into the schools. Now this is going to shock you, so please hold on to your seats. He went on Morning Joe and was questioned by multimillionaire on-air personality Mike Barnicle, who wanted to know how he was going to pay for this.
Every citizen of every state is concerned with, I'm sure, many of the issues that you just spoke about: health care, teacher salaries, good schools for their children, their children's future. But every state, like Florida, has a problem in terms of how do you maintain the fiscal health of the state. So what specifically are you going to do, other than raising taxes in Florida, to maintain the fiscal health of your state?
What specifically are you going to do other than raising taxes? When you have multimillionaires on set who are opposed ideologically to any kind of increased taxes, you're going to get that question. Now, Governor Scott cut hundreds of millions of dollars from taxes paid by Floridians, and nobody asked Governor Scott how he was going to pay for that. This is the insane, overarching lie in America. Tax cuts for the rich and government spending on programs that make rich people richer are virtually never questioned. Anything proposed to help the poor to have access to education, health care, or transportation is portrayed as being ridiculous. How many times do you hear of people like this gubernatorial candidate or Bernie Sanders or Zephyr Teachout? They're described as crazy because they are suggesting that we do something to spend resources on the poor. The cost of housing prisoners now has risen. This is from an article about California. Their state prison average cost now is $75,000 a year. Now, who's paying for the 2 million people that we have in prison right now? Especially the million that there's no rational reason for them to be in prison. I mean, we could address our penal reform system right now and release 1 million people on parole and save hundreds of billions of dollars. Now, in January of 2015, Time magazine published an article by Mark Thompson, who wanted to look at what did these wars in Iraq and Afghanistan actually cost us. Not just, you know, the moment-by-moment cost, but really when you look at all of the residual costs of the health care of returning veterans and things. He said, a truer measure of the war's total costs pegs them between $4 and $6 trillion. This fuller accounting includes long-term medical care and disability compensation for service members, veterans and families, military replenishment, and social and economic costs. Now, this was done by Linda Blimes of Harvard, an economist at Harvard. In 2013, she came up with these numbers. And I don't know if you all have noticed, but for the last 5 years, we're still there. So $6 trillion. What I find to be ironic, no, it's not ironic. Ironic is way too kind. What I find to be a damnable form of hypocrisy in our news media is that we can go to wars and they will do interviews with administration officials who will say, this won't cost us anything. The oil in Iraq will pay for this. $6 trillion is the actual price tag. But all the media ever reported was how much it wasn't going to cost us. And so they'll propose something like, build a wall between here and Mexico will pay for it. Is there anyone alive that thought that Mexico was going to pay for that wall? I mean, anybody. No, they chant this stuff, but it is clearly not true. So you can give a massive tax cut to the super wealthy, $2 trillion, and no one asks how you're going to pay for it. Folks, when it comes to protecting the super wealthy, there is not a nickel's worth of difference between Fox and MSNBC. Now, I don't watch Fox News for the same reason that I don't drink out of my toilet, but when it comes to these issues of social programming, the multimillionaires on any news network are all singing off the same page of the hymnal. They literally laugh at political candidates who talk about tuition-free higher education. And that would cost us about $45 billion a year. It's nothing compared to just the tax cut that Trump gave to the rich just a month ago. We could replace our current health care system with Medicare for all, and there would be a net savings compared to what we pay now for our health insurance. We could totally scrap insurance companies, go to Medicare for all, and over the next 10 years, we would net $2 trillion in savings. So with no more outlay, none at all, we could go to tuition-free college and universal health care, and it would not cost Americans another dime out of their pockets. Now let me remind you of where I began a few minutes ago. Money does not really exist. Money's just the ruler that we use to measure our resources. Our currency is how we move wealth around, but currency is not wealth. Wealth resides in land, natural resources, services like university education, housing, buildings, machinery, agricultural products, labor, and energy resources. Money's just the yardstick that we use for how we distribute these resources. We are now rapidly moving into an economy that only science fiction writers talked about for 100 years. Manufacturing and agriculture are becoming so mechanized. The family farm is now almost extinct as huge corporate farms have taken their place. Giant combines do the work of hundreds of farmers with small tractors in the workplace every year. More of our refrigerators, cars, computers, and clothing are made by robotic machinery that keeps reducing our need for labor. And very soon we will see self-driving trucks and cars, trains, and even airplanes. Automation can mean that we will become a much more civilized society in which we work less, retire sooner, and have more leisure time to become artists, poets, writers, actors, or for that matter, we could return to some of the skills that humanity has embraced for our entire existence, of trying to grow some of our own food, making some of our personal products by hand, not because we have to, but because we can and because we have the time to do it. But that's not the way our current economy is set up. We are, in fact, going the other way. Rather than shortening the work week and letting people retire earlier, we're asking people to work longer, wait until you're 68 or 70 to retire, and to work for less money and with fewer benefits. This is alarmingly inhumane, but it's also economically entirely unnecessary. Now, this is the one time you're ever going to hear me agree with a Fox News host, but Tucker Carlson recently pointed out that the owner of Amazon, Jeff Bezos, is now the richest man in the world. He's our first trillionaire. But he is holding down salaries so low that the rest of us are subsidizing his payroll by paying welfare to most of his employees. Now, here's the point that very many people miss. And you may not come here for stock advice, but let me tell you. The stock market is not the economy. Just because the Dow and the S&P are going up, that doesn't mean the economy is healthy. Amazon stock has more than doubled in the last year, 110% increase. That's amazing. It's one of the fastest growing stocks in history. But it has become valuable not because the economy is good, but because he is impoverishing his employees. The stock market is up because wages are down. That's not a strong economy. That's slavery. Amen. In the face of a shrinking demand for labor, the idea of a basic universal income for every adult citizen is now growing both in popularity and feasibility. So do away with food stamp programs, do away with disability payments, public housing, welfare of all sorts, and just give every American, I calculated it, $2,000 a month, which is not enough to get you out of poverty, but it's a base income from which then anyone could work and earn more. They could have a better life, but everyone would get $2,000 a month. Now, maybe you cut out the people that are making over 100 grand a year or something, but basically you're creating one single Social Security program. There's no caseworkers, there's no exams, there's no paperwork or administration. Everybody gets $2,000 a month, and that would cost us about $4 trillion a year. Now, here's the question that everybody's going to want to ask.
But let me ask you the other, I think, really important question is, in your plan, how would you pay for this?
I'd like to tell you. You start off by saving $500 billion by eliminating all the other welfare programs. So you're going to have a $4 trillion social program. You do away with $500 billion of other programs. Then you reverse the Trump tax plan, the tax cut, which gives you $2 trillion more. So we're halfway there already, right? We spend $800 billion a year incarcerating 2 million Americans. I can take $400 billion of that back today. And I would not start any more stupid, illegal, unnecessary, and immoral wars where we spend trillions of dollars. So we're already saving money at that point. And for good measure, I would reduce our military budget by about 50%, focusing instead on spending on infrastructure, investments in science, technology, health, and environment. So call me crazy. Go ahead. But this would wipe out hunger. It would allow everyone who can do college work to go to college. It would end homelessness. It would end poverty. It would provide health care to everyone. And as an extra, it would save our planet. All the while increasing the number of musicians, sculptors, actors, and poets in our society. So how crazy is that, really? Here's the deal. The economic system that ushered in the Industrial Revolution and has led to great innovations in agriculture and in our digital technology is now threatening to choke us to death by creating trillionaires at one end of the economy and hundreds of millions of poor people at the other end of the economy. My modest suggestion is that we retool our economy to make this planet habitable by human beings. Corporations, the government, our currency, even the ownership of resources are all illusions, and we can restructure our lives in a way that actually reflects our morals. For the first time in history, it is possible for us to wipe out poverty if only we choose to do it. And if we don't choose to do it, then maybe we deserve whatever dystopian future that the trillionaires want to deal out to us. But I'm not giving up. Solidarity forever.
Thank you for watching our videos. We are entirely dependent on the donations of our listeners and members. We hope that you find this content to be important enough to help us to keep offering these videos to the public at no charge by becoming a regular contributor. Please click on the donate button on our website at www.spfccc.org. Thank you for your support of progressive religious programming.